Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Between My Therapist and I. My name is Lily Smith. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the owner of the Traveling Therapist LLC. I am going to be talking today about accountability, and in particular, we're going to be talking about accountability in the way that we talk to our children. And to do that, I'm going to be using in reference an article by Larissa Dann, which was written in 2015, titled, "Do Your Children Really Make You Mad?" And that article is going to be in the comment section. The link's going to be in the comment section if you actually want to not just follow along, but if you want to read it as well later on and reference it, it's going to be there. So for today, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Let's see what the article has to say. You make me so happy. At first glance, this looks like a positive thing to say to your child. But what about you make me so sad? Hearing you whine makes me so frustrated. What do these phrases have in common? They all use makes me. This blog explores reasons to avoid makes me and looks at alternative phrasing. And if you follow along with me today in this video, I'm going to show you why this article is bringing up a really, really good point. So let's move on. Okay, makes me. We use the phrase makes me in situations where we are impacted by things our children do, by their actions or their behavior. Often we'll say makes me with the best of intentions. We just want our children to know how we feel. My question is, does my child's action make me feel something? Very important. I want you to think about that question. Or do I feel an emotion in response to my child's behavior? Am I a passive victim of their behavior, or will I actively own my feelings about their behavior? Two very different things and two very, very different messages. I think there can be hidden consequences when we use makes me with our children. She goes on to write, makes me blames our children and stops us, the adult, being responsible for our feelings. When I walk into my 4-year-old daughter's bedroom and see pencils and papers strewn around the floor, I might feel annoyed. In this scenario, my daughter just acted. She drew with pencils on paper, spreading them over the floor. I responded with a feeling. The way I feel will be influenced by factors including, and this is another thing to make sure that you pay attention to, the way I feel will be influenced by factors including my own issues, such as whether I have a headache, my assumptions as to why the room was messy, my values around mess, whether I'd ask her to clean up her drawing material, whether I'd had a bad day at work, what time of the day it was, and so on. So there's a whole number of influences that can make a difference on how you will react in a situation like this. Now, she goes on to write, my daughter did not make me feel annoyed. I felt annoyed because I was tired. It was just before bedtime on a weeknight. I'd asked her to clean up the floor. And my expectations was that she'd pick up her pencils immediately. And if you have been following my podcast, you probably are aware that I talk about expectations often. And this is one of the reasons why I do it, is because here the author of the article is actively acknowledging how expectations can play a part on the emotional response of a person. So let's move on. If I'd seen her drawing and it was the weekend, I may have felt differently. I might have been pleased to see her creativity realized. She was in the middle of I may have been pleased to see her creativity, realized she was in the middle of drawing a picture of her family, which she didn't want to stop, and offered to help her tidy up when she's finished. My daughter behaved in exactly the same way each time, but I responded with a different feeling. I have to recognize that I am responsible for the way I react to her behavior. If I said, seeing that mess on the floor makes me annoyed, then I am blaming her for the way I feel. I am not taking responsibility for the feelings that have emerged in response to her behavior. Instead, I am saying that my feelings are her fault. I think the subtle message I'm sending when I say makes me is, you are responsible for the way I feel, or you are to blame for my feelings at the moment. And I actually, as I was reading this a little bit earlier and I was going over the article, it made me think of, I actually hear this one phrase all the time. And I've said it in the past, and I actually caught myself before because I came to realize it did not sound right. Look at what you started. Hundreds of times I have seen children being told that by parents who are arguing with each other because they cannot control their emotions and they cannot manage their feelings. And so they enter into an argument with each other, usually related to how they're parenting. And then they turn around and they tell the kid, look at what you started, or look at what you made me do. And that goes hand in hand with this as well. So moving on. Makes me blames our children for our own personal difficulty. Makes me stops me looking for the reason for their behavior. Children don't misbehave. And this is controversial. I know you're going to be like, oh my goodness, yeah, Lily, come on. But just listen to the article because it does make a very good point. Children don't misbehave, but they behave to meet a need. And this is what Dr. Thomas Gordon from the Gordon Training Institute, who's the institute that this article was for, explains is when we say makes me, we might inadvertently, so without meaning to, be blaming them, the child, for simply trying to fulfill their need. And let's keep moving on with the article because it actually goes on to explain what we're talking about right now. We're all familiar with the situation of running late in the morning, right? So indeed, we might have said something like, you're making me late when you don't eat your breakfast. What if my 8-year-old's reluctance to eating breakfast was because he was afraid to go to school? His best friend had threatened to break his leg yesterday. His need was to feel safe. I suspect my son's response to, you're making me late, in this instance, might be, you don't care. You don't understand anything. And he's just stopped eating. If instead I said something like, when I wait for you to finish breakfast, I'm worried I'll be late for work. I think it might be easier for my son to say, but I'm scared to go to school. So essentially what the article is explaining is that in that statement, that's an I statement, when I wait for you to finish breakfast, I'm worried. So now I'm expressing my emotion and taking ownership of it. I'm worried I'll be late for work. And the child doesn't feel targeted. But I'm scared to go to school. Now the child feels comfortable enough to maybe open up about why they're trying to hold back from finishing breakfast. then moving on. I'll be more open to listening to him, shifting gears, to discover the need behind his behavior. Okay, so when you use the I statement. So here we go. Makes me implies I am the victim. That I'm taking my child's behavior personally. Very, 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 very important. Also important. Personally, I am not taking into consideration that my child is worried about something that might be happening at school or something that they're not looking forward to. No, I'm turning it into a me thing, into a personal situation. So key here. So then, rather than seeing our children innocently behave to meet a need, in this case, in this example, it would be safety, we can sometimes believe there's negative intent behind their actions. The brat, he's just a bratty kid, or he's just a misbehaving child, or he just, can't get things done in the morning and he just doesn't care. So that's what she's talking about, referencing something along those lines. So she goes on to saying that they want to get at us. So now it's become you against me, the child against the parent. And that's really, really common to see that battle. Or they're trying to, or us believing that they're trying to push our buttons, which actually means we've taken their behavior personally. You made me feel sad when I didn't get a kiss goodbye. This statement says I am the victim of my child's selfish behavior. I've taken her actions personally. So this is another example. Instead of saying this, I could look at her behavior. Instead of saying, you make me so sad. Instead of saying that, you can look at her behavior differently by looking for her need. In this case, her need was to socialize. So this is another example of another child. My child was simply excited to see her friends and caught up in the moment. She got caught up in the morning. So she ran off to see them. And I could say, I felt, so now we're taking ownership of the emotion and, the feeling. I felt sad when we didn't kiss goodbye because I love our goodbye cuddles. But then I realized you were excited. Then I realized you were excited to see your friends. So there, the author is explaining an example of a parent fully taking on ownership of the thought process, fully taking on ownership of the feelings, and rationalizing it outside of this is not a personal attack on me. This is, my child was just behaving in a very natural way by, expressing her excitement by running into her friend's arms rather than mine. So then she goes on to say, makes me the source of emotional blackmail? Maybe. Could it be? Just about every time I teach parents about I messages, and then she goes on to, when I see/hear, then I see the behavior. I feel because, cost to the parent, a participant will say. So I'll break that down to you because it's kind of a strange way to write it. But what she's explaining is how an I statement and an I message is broken down. But isn't that emotional blackmail? A true I message is simply honest self-disclosure, which includes how you feel. I think that including makes me, in an I message could be felt and interpreted as emotional blackmail. So when children are blamed for their parents' emotions, they will feel responsible for the way their parents feel, and they will think it is up to them to make their parents feel better. And again, I bring you back to the example that I was thinking of when parents are in the middle of a heated argument and they turn to the child and they use the child has the reason for the argument and the reason for them not being able to control their emotions. And they immediately go to, you make me so mad. You make me do this. You're responsible for this. You're the one that's causing all this trouble. When are you going to change? When are you going to behave? When are you going to learn? Emotional blackmail. So moving on. Children want to please their parents. So they will feel compelled to change their behavior to fix things. But they may feel resentful because they have been manipulated. They've been told it's their fault that their parent is sad, angry, or upset. This happens a lot because, like, say, for example, mom and dad end up divorcing. And this entire time, the child has been thinking that everything is their fault, that the whole reason why they've been arguing and stuff like that is because of the child. The child's thinking that the whole time. And then over time, as they get older, they start to realize, oh, mom and dad had a lot of other issues. And now that they're divorced, they're still having a lot of other issues. That child is going to turn around and resent you so much because for the longest time they just felt this terrible guilt that they just could never overcome. So that's that's ongoing example. So then she goes on to say, stops us modeling self-responsibility. So by you saying you make me, I am not responsible for my feelings. I am not responsible for my emotions. You make me. Therefore, you are the person that's in control. Think about the way we want to see our children behave. Will we respond more positively to, you made me angry, mommy, when you wouldn't give me a biscuit, or I felt sad, mommy, when I didn't get a biscuit when I asked for it? What do you feel is a better response from a child for a situation where their expectations were not met? So we need to help our children understand and own their feelings rather than blame other people, such as us, for their feelings. When we communicate with I message that say I feel, then we're modeling self-responsibility to our children. And you always want to remember, and I will say this to my dying breath, our children do not have the capacity to see the whole of the world the way that we do. We are essentially the moon and the stars to them. We are the example to follow when it comes to what is maturity, what is emotional regulation, what is being a grown-up. They look at us. They focus on what we're doing and they want to copy it because they believe that we are it. We're the best that there is. So keep that in mind. Now, finally, how to create an iMessage without the words makes me. Sometimes we parents aren't happy with what our children are doing. In fact, we can get quite annoyed and frustrated with our children's actions. They might leave their toys on the lounge room floor, and you just know that a tiny piece of Lego could find its way under your bare foot. Sometimes we love what our children do. We feel their warm softness as they snuggle against us, smelling their just washed hair, and could just burst with contentment. What do we say in these situations? Dr. Thomas Gordon devised 3-part iMessages as part of his Parent Effectiveness Training, PET, course. The iMessage consists of, number 1, a non-blameful description of the behavior. Examples that are given are 2. When I see the toys on the floor, ... When I see the toys on the floor. When we snuggle. So that's the first part of the iMessage, is a non-blameful description. You're snuggling or you're seeing the toys on the floor. Secondly, move on to the next part of the message. How you felt about the behavior. I feel concerned. I just love it. So back to the first. When I see the toys on the floor, I feel concerned. When we snuggle, I just love it. And then the third part, the impact or cost to you or another person, such as sibling, grandparent, etc. This is the because, where you give your child a reason. That I might step on a Lego block and hurt my foot because it reminds me how lucky I am to be your mom. So here's the full example of the I statement, start to finish. When I see the toys on the floor, I feel concerned that I might step on a Lego block and hurt my foot. When we snuggle, I just love it because it reminds me how lucky I am to be your mom. So there, no blame. You specifically acknowledge how you felt about the behavior, and you specifically acknowledge how you believe it might be impacting someone else or yourself, or even the child. And finally, she goes on to say, these iMessages are honest and congruent. Importantly, they are phrased in a way that is non-blameful. I think the iMessage is the ultimate in self-responsibility, describing and owning your feeling about what your child has done stops us blaming our children and allows us and our children to grow a relationship built on trust and honesty. I really hope that you guys were able to understand and take just some valuable information from this article. I really felt like it described accountability very well. Obviously, there's other statements other than makes me, but this is one that is really, really commonly used and really, really powerful, and that it can create long-lasting behaviors that you don't want your children to have. So that's why I did it. If you enjoyed it, please share, subscribe, click on the little bell to get reminders for future videos. And I hope that I see you around. And if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, if you have any ideas on videos, even if you want to participate on a video, please feel free to share your comments at the bottom. And that's it for today. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.